I call this meeting of the House Committee Finance and Policy to order. Let it be known we have quorum, and we'll be starting today with some approval of the minutes. Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I would move the minutes.
Representative Nash moves the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The minutes are approved. All right, so today we have a great presentation ahead of us from the Realtors. I'm going to save my comments for the end because I know they have a hard stop today at 4 o'clock. So we're going to get into the presentation. If people can hold their questions to the end, that would be really helpful so they can get through their slides, and then we'll ask questions. And if you have comments, let's save comments for after 4 o'clock when they're gone. So questions before 4, comments after. Thank you, members. And with that, I'll hand it over to our testifiers. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Paul Legger. I'm Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs for the Minnesota Realtors Association. Thank you very much for the invitation to join you today to share some really interesting and we hope informative housing market data that we hope will be helpful for you as you continue the discussion that you've already started around policies that could help us address the supply and affordability challenges that Minnesotans statewide are encountering. Just real briefly, a little bit about our organization. Minnesota Realtors is a statewide business trade association formed in 1919. We have more than 22,000 members who are licensed by the Minnesota Department of Commerce and who work with buyers and sellers of all types of property and at all price points. Among the services that Minnesota Realtors provides for our membership is collecting and analyzing housing market data. That information is also available for the public on our website. My colleague David Arbit, Minnesota Realtors Director of Research, is our data expert. He's our go-to source for housing market data and provides expert insight into the latest market trends affecting buyers and sellers statewide. While David's relatively new to our organization, he's not new to market data research and analysis, having come to us from the Minneapolis area Realtors. Mr. Chair, now I'd like to turn it over to David Arbit for what I'm sure will be a fascinating and informative tour of housing market data and trends. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Arbit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Paul, for the warm introduction. David Arbit, Director of Research with the Minnesota State Association. As Paul said, excited to give you guys a little adventure in data if you guys are ready. All right. I want to start a little bit of a walk down memory lane. The year is 1937, as you can see. And the property at 3809 Longfellow is being offered for $3,450. I'd like to take you to a rate sheet from 1982, when conventional loans started at 18%. So we've been in different places before. We're in an undersupplied part right now. We're in kind of a weird cycle. We'll talk about that, but I did want to show some history to show some change. And you can page that gentleman from his rate sheet. As we think through the market, the residential housing market, we think a lot about different indicators and metrics. How do you assess how things are going? Well, you have to measure them. So we have a lot of different yardsticks and rulers and measuring tapes to measure what's happening with seller activity, buyer activity, inventory. I'll give you a hint, there's not enough of it. Prices, absorption rates, anything and everything related to market health, market dynamics, and market trends, we report on. So happy to share this with committee staff, with your staff, so I want to make sure everybody has it. So kind of staying on a historical note, I want to take everybody back to 1967 this time, and we're going to look at this change in seller activity along with change in buyer activity. So we think of seller activity as new listings. If I list my home, 1234 Main Street on the market, I'm a seller, I listed a home, I have an active listing on the market. A sale is when that listing is absorbed off the market, so it goes from an active to a closed status. It's off market. So you can see what's happened with new supply entering the market and then demand and how quickly that demand is able to absorb that supply off the market. Pretty clear to see our housing bubble right here, and then pretty clear to see the crash right there. One of the reasons I like to show this is because it sets the stage and it gives a little bit of a historical perspective. I like to show this ratio because it's really the relationship between buyer and seller activity, supply and demand, that drives market times, prices, inventory levels, so on and so forth. So it's useful for us to see just how much seller and buyer activity have come down in light or in response to the Fed's rate hikes as they were combating 40-year high inflation. We've made really good progress on that, but we're not quite done yet. So you can see how sellers have sort of started to recover a little bit, and buyers as well. We've been asked by the media, by the public, by our members, have we seen the bottom yet for this cycle? I'm not sure. It sure looks like we have, right? It seems like we have. Starting to kind of take a little bit of a leg off the bottom. And sometimes if the data is a little volatile, I like to paint a trend line so everybody can kind of see the trend, zooming out a little bit. Okay, this one is what we call our great mean reversion. So this is quite simply average sales price over time. And I may zoom in a little bit here and there just so everybody can see, all the members can see. 1960, you're looking at our average sales price, just how much it's risen. You're also looking at this sort of channel, that red khaki channel is where our average growth would be. So high end of that channel, kind of above average growth, low end, below average. Pretty clear to see our housing bubble when we hit 277.5, and then our crash following that when we touched a little over 190, about 192. Ever since then, we've been rallying ever higher. And it's even easy to see when price growth accelerated during the COVID buying spree. It's pretty clear to see price growth accelerating, and now we're seeing price growth decelerating just a little bit as higher rates have kept some would-be buyers out of the market, and so it's a little bit less competitive, relatively fewer multiple offers, and prices just aren't being driven higher to the same degree. There are still multiple offers happening, but not to the same degree. You know, I guess I'll say as well, I sort of expected prices to level out a little more than they have. So prices have decelerated, but they have not declined. The rate of growth has decelerated, but it has not, prices have not declined. Okay, shifting gears just a little bit, we're looking at change in showing activity in blue combined with the 30-year fixed rate mortgage in gray. Why do we care about this? Well, the best leading indicator for what's going to happen in the market is a showing. Before I close on a deal, I usually have to tour it. I have to see the home, see if it's a fit before I work with my agent to write an offer. And so we kind of trended this and we tracked it and we asked the question, just how rate sensitive are today's buyers? And we found very, right, very. Not a surprise, but still good to measure it like we were talking. So when rates are up here, notice how showings are down. When rates are down, showings are up. And so it's almost a perfect inverse relationship, showing that buyers really are rate sensitive. Thinking through some of the historical change in buyer activity, seller activity, inventory, and so on, I may move a little quickly through some of these new listings. We go all the way back to 2005, and we can see all that activity coming on, some from builders, some single family, some condo, some downtown, some way out in the third ring suburbs and exurbs. So it was kind of all over. But the other thing you'll notice is that seller activity really flattened out. After the bubble and kind of into the crash, seller activity has been pretty flat. That's a big part of what's led us to our inventory crisis and the lack of supply that's causing all the affordability challenges that we're seeing today. I like to zoom in and just kind of look at, you know, just how much seller activity has recovered. So we were up about 6.5% last year after down about 10% 2 years in a row. We're up off the valley. We can't say with certainty that we're completely out of the woods. It sure looks like it. A couple times you'll see me bounce between statewide versus Twin Cities. I know a lot of districts are metro, and you know everybody, it turns out, is in the state of Minnesota. So I wanted to make sure members had a little bit of a different view there. Metro versus greater Minnesota dynamics are a little bit different. But one thing they have in common is a housing shortage. That is a factor across our entire great state. Well, why would seller activity be so low? What's pressuring that? Why would that consumer behavior be happening? How do we explain it? Well, as I'm sure you've either know personally or from friends or colleagues, people are holding on to their interest rates, right? People are married to their interest rates. And if you look here, this chart, this little pie chart asks the question, how many outstanding rates are financed below 3%, below 4%? I guess I would ask the committee to just disregard the blue and the yellow, or excuse me, the blue, red, and yellow. Look at light blue and green, and those two combined are everything under 4%. So if we add up this blue and this green, we're looking at how many loans are financed below 4%. This is national, I should specify. This is national. We do not yet have this state or local. So if I add these up, 25 and 45 is about 70%. That means more than 2 in 3 outstanding loans are financed below 4%. No surprise, sellers have pulled back. They're locked into their interest rate, right? So we call that the lock-in effect. So we just looked at change in new listings overall, but we know that not all price points behave the same, and they're all impacted and influenced by different factors, some more rate sensitive to others, and a lot of other dynamics. So new listings, you see the biggest gains in the higher price points because that's where there's more activity. Those folks are a lot less rate sensitive than, say, first-time buyers. So they're listing homes, builders are building homes, and they are, those buyers are able to purchase those homes and absorb them off the market. Closings, somewhat similar story. I'll zoom in a little bit here. We're looking at about the last 20 years. Look at the 95,000. That was when we had that boom in sales from the COVID buying frenzy. And then look at the decline since from 95 to about 66. You'll also notice that 1% gain last year in 24, which we're encouraged by, but it's a little bit too early to say if we're kind of out of the woods. Let's see what happens with rates and inventory. And then here again, Metro, I won't dive too deep, more like a 2% increase in the Metro, closer to 1% statewide. Here again, a familiar pattern, a very familiar pattern, where we see declines in signed purchase agreements or declines in housing demand in the most affordable end of the market. So everything under 300,000. Now, some of you are probably wondering, what would have been 280 a couple years ago is probably 320 today. So some homes have naturally sort of aged out of the last price cohort, if you will. So that is a factor. But the declines in inventory in the most affordable end of the market does not account for the inflation of those homes, right? So we're still at a huge shortage, even despite what inflation has done. We call this a little bit of an inflection point, or whenever a trend line crosses, we tend to pay attention. So what we see here is, again, closed sales by price point. In blue, you have under 300,000, all the way up to purple, that's over $1 million. You'll see $1 million plus is a small share, but it is a growing share, and we'll look at that more. I think this is what I would draw the members' attention to, where we see sales under 300,000 finally actually go below sales between 3 and 500,000. So that finally kind of crossed. Whenever these trend lines cross, again, it kind of makes us pay attention. It gets us asking why, what's happening, what's causing this. Days on market. Are homes taking a long time to sell, or are they selling pretty quickly? The answer is still really pretty quickly, although market times have been up for the last few years. I'll do our little zoom in here. So you can see almost 100 days, listings spent almost 100 days on the market in 2011, right after the crash. 42 days, you'll notice, is actually still below 2020 levels of 47, but it is up over the last few years. The market is not monolithic, although some want to think of it as a singular thing. Look at days on market. There's a little bit of a Goldilocks zone. There's a sweet spot zone here where this 300,000 to 400,000 is selling the quickest at 36 days, so a little over a month. And by the way, that's where our median is, about 350 state, about 380 metro. So no surprise, those listings are spending the least time on market. They're going off market quick. Median sales price. Everybody seems to like this one, especially given the direction it's been heading, at least if you own a home. If you don't, you haven't been as excited about some of these numbers. So you can see during some of the COVID years, we had a 9%, an 11%. And then as we talked about, price growth has slowed a little bit, more like 2 to 4%. And you can see we're at about 345 as of the end of last year. That's state. I've got metro, state, metro. You all have that. In addition to looking at the price, we like to track the year-over-year change in price. And it tells a little bit of a different story. I'll say this is a little wonky. This is a little bit of a wonky one, but this shows the year-over-year change in the typical home price. So you can see when homes went on sale, when values were falling 20% year over year into 08, 09. You can see a little bit of that tax credit period, if anybody remembers that time. And then you can see some strong growth as you had some first-time buyers, some investors, and some others sort of picking up these properties. And then we had more of a typical price growth type environment. And then we can see COVID come in where price growth really accelerated again. And then lastly, I'll zoom in on just our last few years, where you can see the COVID boom slow down as the Fed poured cold water on the market. And now we're seeing that starting to recover a little bit. We're starting to see that recover. Yet another metric that we track and love is the percent of original list price. So if I'm asking $400,000 for my house, what am I getting? $390, $4, $410? And so this asks and answers that question. Well, there was a time when your average seller was actually getting 101% of their list price. So that's 100% of asking price plus a percent on top. And then we came down to 100%, and you'll see now we've kind of settled into 98 to 98.5%. You'll also notice that that is below 2020 levels, but about on par with 2019 levels. So just once again, I'll show the history. And I'll also note that our 98% is above our 05 level. So just so everyone can kind of see that trend and exactly what it looked like during COVID, after COVID, and other periods. You know, this used to be a little bit of a sort of an esoteric metric, our affordability index. And I think people are afraid of it. And they shouldn't be, because all you really need to know to read it is higher numbers equate to better affordability, lower numbers, worse off affordability. The nerdier explanation is an affordability index of 93, which we have right now, tells us that the median income in Minnesota is 93% of the minimum income needed to qualify for the median priced home at today's interest rates. I told you it was a little nerdy. So what that tells us is the median income in Minnesota is 7% less than the minimum income needed to qualify for the median priced home, assuming you're not spending more than 30% of your income, pre-tax income, toward your mortgage payment. So that's not a number we're proud of. That is a number caused by a lack of supply, strong demand over the last few years, and it really reflects just the chronic undersupply situation that we've been in for going on, I believe, 15 years. Speaking of inventory, this is a chart of inventory going back to 2005. You may hear this, you'll hear this referenced different ways. Inventory, a home for sale, active listings, all the same thing, right? All synonymous. So when I list my home on the market, I have just listed a home. It is a new listing. It is now an active listing, or a home for sale, or part of inventory. So what we saw is we used to have 42,000+ homes for sale on the market. A couple years ago, we had 8,100. 43,000 to 8,100. And what have we had during that time? Population growth. We've had population growth during that time. And so this really highlights the challenge for us, for homeowners. It really is the factor that's holding people back because they can't find what they need. First-time buyers, upsizers, downsizers. Doesn't matter kind of what phase of life. It doesn't really matter what phase of life. There just isn't enough product out there to meet the needs of Minnesotans. I'll do our little zoom in so you guys can see some of the details. So sort of pre-COVID, we had 16,000 active listings. We chopped that in half to get down to 8,000. and now we're just clawing our way back to 11 or 12,000, you'll notice we're still well below the 16,000 that we had pre-COVID. So we have not recovered from that. Another interesting one, members, inventory by price range. So we sort of saw a little bit of this, but this has trended over time. So under 200,000 in this light blue here, and then you see 2 to 300, 3 to 500, and then 500,000 plus. Couple takeaways here. We can see a lot of that activity during the crash when some of those homes went on sale. There was also just more of them. But I think the bigger takeaway here is this, the cross, when things cross. So this under 200 actually crossed 7, 8 years ago. But look at the most recent cross where the darkest line crosses the darkest blue line. So that tells us there's actually more product over 500,000 than there is between 3 and 500,000. Again, a little bit concerning. So a couple different ways to think through the inventory shortage. I do spend some time thinking about this. One way is, what would it take to get us balanced? What would it take to get us to a balanced market? So how many more units, how many more housing units do we need across this price spectrum in order to be a healthy, balanced market? And when we say balanced market, simple. We're not favoring sellers. We're not favoring buyers. We're in the middle. We're a neutral, balanced market. We have not seen that for a long time, but this is what it would take to get there. And in this 300,000 to 400,000 range, again, where our median is, very popular first-time buyer range, you'll see we need 4,600 new units needed. 4,500 just to get to a balanced market today, not assuming any population growth, which we'll inevitably have by the time we get these units built in the dirt, right? Built and framed and shingled and sold. So an interesting perspective there. Another lens through which to look at the same issue, what kind of increase in units would we need to get to that 5 months of supply, that balanced market? And sure enough, over 200% in some of these popular ranges. Overall, we need to double plus half. We need 150% increase to become a balanced market. So double plus half. And in these other more popular ranges, more like triple and then some. And I think I highlight some of that here. So yes, that means overall we need to double our inventory to have a balanced market, more like double and a half. We need to triple the amount of housing inventory between 200,000 and 400,000, which equated to 4,600, roughly 4,600 new units needed. Higher price ranges are more balanced. We saw that, but we also saw there is no segment that is balanced nor adequately supplied. You know, I think it's okay to aim high. In the highly unlikely case we slightly overshoot some of the target, we'll be better prepared for the population growth that'll happen by that time. One of our favorite metrics is month supply, and it's kind of like cheating because it's two metrics at once. It's supply and demand. So month supply simply answers the question, how long will our inventory last in light of recent sales activity? And don't overthink this. In fact, this is pretty close to reality. We have 10,000 active listings. We're selling 5,000 a month. In 2 months, we've gotten rid of our 10,000. That means we have 2 months of supply if we have 10,000 active listings. Some of you will also hear the word absorption rate, which is very similar. In fact, measures an identical thing. It's just a slightly different way. So 5 months of supply equals a 20% absorption rate. 3 months of supply means a third of your supply is absorbed each month, 33% absorption rate. Just so everybody is aware of that. So as
Mr.
we
Arbit?
think about, yes.
Just want to jump in quick. So the last couple slides you went through before this aren't in our packet.
Uh-oh.
And it doesn't need to happen now, but I was catching over in the room, like watching
Yes,
that
yes.
data. If you could just make sure to get that
They
to
will
us,
be.
because we
They
were
will
very,
be.
very interested in that.
Thank
bit.
you so much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, a good one. We will make sure those get in. We'll absolutely make sure.
Thank
I threw
you.
in a couple surprises this morning. I couldn't help myself.
Totally understand.
I couldn't help myself. Just too many charts. And I had to hold back here, by the way. Lots of charts, lots of excitement, lots of good information for people to make decisions on. So sellers markets. What do we mean when we talk about a seller's market? Well, we have a lot of demand, really excited about not a lot of supply. So this is where sellers do really well. They get offers above list price. We just saw 102, 101%. By the way, there were some local markets that were getting 108% of list price. Others still getting 92, 95. So seller's market, a lot of demand, not a lot of supply. Contrast that with a buyer's market where you've got a lot of supply but not a ton of demand. Inverse markets. I won't read all the hallmarks or trademarks of these different markets, but it's pretty. I think we all kind of know and understand. Sellers markets, low supply, home selling quickly, over asking. Buyers markets, little slower market. Buyers able to have a little bit more wiggle room. All we're asking for is a balanced market. That's what we're shooting for. That seems pretty elusive, but a balanced market with 5 to 6 months of supply. You've got 4 units of demand, well matched up with 4 units of supply. Everybody can get their goals met. Month supply of inventory statewide. Where did we end last year? Just about 2 months. We need 5. So we had 2 months of supply as of the end of last year, which was just barely a gain. And so that puts us at about 2.1 months, still drastically undersupplied.
When's the last time? We had 5.
Last time we were near 5 months is when the pendulum overswung from 6.5 down to 4.5, and that was between 2011 and 2012. So when we say we haven't been balanced for 13, 14 years, that's kind of what we mean. That's what we mean. I should say it is interesting to see that the COVID impact again, when we went from 2.2 down to 1 month of supply, and now recovering a little bit, but not really moving forward in terms of adequate supply. Month supply by price range, talked about this a little bit. I want to highlight 1.6 months of supply in our most affordable, popular first-time buyer segments. A little bit better supplied, 4.5 months of supply as you get over $1 million. So that's a little bit better supplied, but technically still undersupplied relative to demand. But obviously our biggest concerns, are kind of, well, it's really across the board, but the most acute shortages are in the most affordable ranges, unsurprisingly. So that's where we need to be for a balanced neutral market, somewhere between this 5 to 6 mark. You'll notice no segment is there, but luxury is getting close. Luxury is getting close, but no segment is there. So when we think about low inventory, is it just a matter of there's not enough homes for sale, too bad, oh well? Well, there's a lot of implications, both kind of up and downstream from that. So there's fewer choices and options for buyers. Owners are kind of feeling stuck. Homes don't meet people's needs. Prices are rising and accelerating quickly, which harms affordability, of course. Leads to the sort of hot competitive market we saw between 2020 and 2022, but really between 2012 and 2022, right? Really that whole period. It constrains economic and job growth and new tax base from forming. It worsens our racial housing gap, which I think we'll talk about, and fewer homeowners overall, not what we think of as positive outcomes. So this is national. So I want to zoom out and look at national for just a slide here before I dive back into our local and statewide info. In red, you have 1-unit structures, housing starts. This goes back to 2000. Just think of this as a permitted unit that's being built. A housing unit is started. Red is 1 unit, and then blue is 2+ unit structures. So duplexes, some multifamily. And this doesn't specify, renter versus owner occupied. This is just units being built. One thing I notice is that 2+ unit structures, all-time highs. All-time highs. Look at that peak in blue was actually higher than its previous peak. How about for 1-unit structures? Well, here's its recent peak. We're not even really close. So we haven't gotten back, and we're still a good ways away, and that's a concern. Getting to more local info, and you know what? I'm going to plot population as well. So we've got population in Minnesota in blue here, and then we've got new private housing units authorized. So basically building permits in red. Something's broken. Something's broken here. We were kind of trending along, and notice these are different scales. They're sort of on different axes, but notice they were kind of trending alongside one another. And then after the housing crash, we couldn't get back, and we still haven't gotten back. And we are feeling it in so many different ways across the state. This is one unit structures, even more pronounced, even more noticeable, the gap between kind of where we were and where we are. And again, we've seen nothing but population growth since then. Oh boy, interest rates. I am not a lender and not a rate expert. However, we sure have seen what it's done to affordability and all the other data and metrics that we measure. Showed you guys right at the front end, there was a time when rates were 18%. There was also a time when they were 2.6, and now they're about 7. So, you know, as we get inflation under control, we're optimistic on that. Hopefully the Fed can start to take more action and we can start to normalize rates a little bit more. I think there was, well, I'll just go to my next slide. I think we were thinking that hopefully the movement would follow the blue trend line. Lately, it's kind of looking like the rate movement might follow the orange trend line. So I think maybe the pace of cuts, a little bit fewer, a little bit farther between, unfortunately. Which means supply growth and adding more units to the market is even more important because it's one of the only levers that we have if we're not on the FOMC and can't control interest rates as much as we wish we could. So thinking about the tools specifically in our toolbox. Yes, monthly budgets are stretched. I wish I had better news to report to the committee about this, but I don't. I'll just show you what's happened with payments over the last few years. So the typical payment on the median priced home in Minnesota is $2,550, $2,500 a month. And just a few years ago, it was more like $1,620. So that's $900 a month in extra payment, monthly payment, which is really eroding the average Minnesotan's household budget and really causing some strain. Yes, notice, I do want to specify, Mr. Chair and members, this is an all-in, all-included PITI payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Oh, and by the way, we made an adjustment to our insurance assumption, and any ideas on which way we made that adjustment? Little bit of an increase in that assumption. It's not perfect, but we do some surveying, we look at the data, and we feel really confident about it. This one is troubling and is really harming far too many. And by the way, if we're committing another, well, $850, $900 state, more like $1,000, $1,100 a month, Twin Cities, what else aren't we doing with that money? We're not spending it in the economy where we can grow jobs and add tax base and really start to grow our economy. So we think about that discretionary income, discretionary spending piece quite a bit. You're not going out and getting the iPhone, buying the Columbia jacket, going out for dinner, picking up a six-pack of Summit, whatever it is. And then Twin Cities, so state versus metro, state, metro, we like to kind of show both, knowing the bulk of our activity is, of course, in the metro, not to downplay the many greater Minnesota wonderful communities. So $2,800 versus $1,800 a month, that's just about $1,000 more a month in mortgage payment in just 3 years. That one's a concern. That one's sticky. That one really sticks with our members and with people that we share that with. HUD says if we spend more than 30% of our income on housing, we're housing burdened. We're housing burdened. Renters can be burdened. Homeowners can be burdened. Where are we at as of last year? About 27.5% of our pre-tax income was spent on housing. That's not at 30, but it is getting close. It is getting close. Some of our peer cities and on the coasts are already 40, 50 or more percent of their income. So I suppose maybe we should celebrate that, but some concerns that we're getting toward that 30%, and unless we do something about inventory, about affordability, we are concerned that this will easily go above 30%. What's the other way to address this? If income growth were to accelerate, then even if housing costs were flat, if we could accelerate income growth, the payments would be occupying a smaller share of our income. Another way to look at it. So given all of that, would you expect there would be more or fewer first-time buyers in the market? I would say fewer, and sure enough, the national data, this is from NAR, the national data confirms that. So here again, I wish I had better news for you all. First-time buyer share is at its lowest level since '81. So that is going on a 45-year low. I'll just scan to 50%. Remember when home prices went on sale in '08, '09? A lot of first-time buyers were buyers. They flooded right into the market because they could. More recently, fewer than 1 in 4 buyers are first-time buyers. Fewer than 1 in 4. That's a concern for us. Oh, and then the trend. So we're staying in our homes a little bit longer, median age of home buyers, and if we have to save longer and wait for our incomes to grow a little bit more, well, most of us age about 12 months every year, so we're all getting about 12 months older each year. Some of us get 18 months older every year, but most of us get about 12 months older each year. And so look at the age of first-time home buyers. 38, it used to be 31, 32, 33, all of a sudden 36, 35, 38. So this is the impact that having to wait longer, having to save more, needing larger down payments, and all the concerns stemming from affordability crisis, inventory, an undersupply crisis, you're starting to see the impact of those waves ripple out. And then how long are we staying in our homes? Well, we used to stay 5, 6, 7 years, and then all of a sudden the world changed, and now we're staying 9, 10 years. I think it stands to reason we would not feel like we had to spend so much time in our homes if we had other units that worked for us. So think of boomers downsizing into single-level townhomes so they can free up the family home, right, for a first-time buyer, for a move-up buyer. Someone's downsizing, someone's upsizing. That's the way the market should work. People feel stuck, partly because they're married to their interest rate, partly because if they bought even their current home from themselves, they may not like the payment. Third of all, boomers aging in place, staying a little bit longer, this is not the way that it's been. And look, as soon as in '08, '09, we know when things kind of changed and what caused it. And we've had that shortage, like we said, for 15 years. So if we had adequate supply going back to 2010, I don't think people would feel stuck in their homes or married to their interest rates or whatever their reason is. By the way, implications for PCA, for personal care folks. I know folks think about this as folks are staying in their homes more. A little bit of more encouraging news, although I want to be cautious about that. Some of you have heard and read we have one of the worst racial homeownership gaps in the nation. It's not something we're proud of. I don't think it's really not reflective of who we are as a state and as a region. So when people say 25%, 75%, 50% homeownership rate, this is what they mean. So we look at the ACS data, we look at the census data, and by the way, we're looking at state in blue and then metro in gray. And so our white Caucasian community having about a 75% ownership rate, and you guys can follow our different communities of color all the way throughout this chart to our American Indian Native community, to our Black African American community, and you can see just how much ownership rates change as we go through the different communities here. Next one is a little bit more encouraging, and I'll mostly kind of focus. I'll focus on our Black African American community. Over the last 5, 6, 7 years, this group has gone from a home ownership rate around 25% to the census data actually shows closer to 32%. So it's gone from more like 1 in 4 owning to more like 1 in 3. And other groups have made good progress as well. So we are making some progress on this. I think it's okay to acknowledge that while still acknowledging it's just started and we have a ton of work to do. So I do want to kind of think about both. I'll fly through a few others. Sometimes we get questions, media gets questions, our members have questions. Percentage of sales under 300,000, so just kind of starting to wrap up here. How many of our sales are under 300,000? Used to be 85%. Lately, it's more like 26%. That is quite a change. Well, what's been growing? Million plus has been one area where we've seen growth. The folks who shop in this range aren't as rate sensitive, plain and simple. They're not as rate sensitive, and that's okay. So we see million plus deals used to be only 1% of our market. Now it's closer to 3.5%. And look at the growth even over the last 4 or 5 years. So pretty clear to see that as a growth market. And no wonder, as the other more affordable segments have pulled back, luxury is occupying a greater share, right, a greater footprint in the overall market. Let's see. So some people also ask, are we a 50-50 townhouse condo versus single family? Are we a 90% single family, 10% townhouse condo? We're about 74% single family, leaving the other 25-26 to townhomes and condos. I always find it interesting to look back in time to 06. Why would single family share be so low? Well, we had a lot of condos, right? We had a lot of condos selling, and so fewer single family. A few more here, new construction. You know, I do leave some of this. I think I have a Housing First colleague somewhere in the room, or at least I did. You know, I do leave some of this to our builders who really have a great handle on this. We report on just what we see from North Star, from the MLS, from the regional MLS, and what we see is, caveat before I share this, we're underreporting because not all builders report their sales to the MLS. So we won't have perfect data, as much as I wish we did, trust me. So when we're showing about 12% new, it's probably more like 15, 16 MLS reported. So new construction's growing, but it's not yet back to these previous highs. This is one of the best ways we can start to build our way out of this. So we have to think about ways to make it easier to build homes. Lender mediated. We used to watch this really closely. We're not watching it as closely anymore. But you'll see only 1% is either, only 1% of our deals are either foreclosures or short sales. You'll also notice in 2021 that fell to about 0.5%. So we're about back to 2020 levels at 1.1, 1.2. Nothing too alarming here. We're watching it, but nothing too alarming. I think I have one more surprise here that I may not have included, but we will make sure we include, and we'll get that to committee staff. A lot of you work in Greater Minnesota and represent Greater Minnesota. So I wanted to mention, you know, we track all of our beautiful regions, Alexandria, Brainerd, Detroit Lakes, Fergus Falls, Mankato, St. Cloud. And I want to point out a few things, and you'll notice a theme here. Alexandria, 1.8 months of supply, undersupplied. Brainerd, 2.6 months of supply, undersupplied. Grand Rapids, 2.4 months of supply, undersupplied. Detroit Lakes, Fergus Falls, Duluth and up the North Shore. Hibbing, Virginia, up on the range. Mankato, down in Central. St. Cloud, Rochester, Wilmer. The 7-county metro, the 16-county metro, and the whole state of Minnesota. Undersupplied. The only region that's a very small exception, Bemidji. So our friends there technically have a more or less balanced market. You know, I won't go deep into rate forecast, but I want members to know, you know, we talked about it. We were thinking rates would come down a little bit more quickly than it seems like they are going to. So not having a PhD in economics, I guess I'll just leave you with that. And then a few others who forecast rates. I tend to kind of take the average somewhere in the middle. With that, those are my official slides, Mr. Chair, and I'll turn it back.
Well, thank you for the great presentation. It looks like we got a lot of questions lined up, so we'll start with that. First on the list is going to be Representative Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Arbit, always a good time to have you in. You and I have had Nerd Fest in my office a number of times. This takes me back to quantitative methods in grad school. One of the things that I wanted to ask, and I have a list, but I'll be brief. So population growth over the last few years, you had mentioned in one of your slides, but what price point are those people trying to come in at? I didn't see that on one of the slides. So we've had an increase apparently in people living in Minnesota, but when they enter the housing market, what level are they able to enter it at? So you said that the $1 million house is becoming more common, but I doubt the people who are moving in are coming in at the million mark. What is the dollar value plus or minus of that house that they are likely to be pursuing?
Yeah,
Mr. Arbit.
Chair, Representative Nash. That's a tricky one. We don't really track it. A couple different ways to think about it. You know, someone moving from a lesser populated small town in Minnesota to the metro could be one thing, but someone leaving a higher priced coastal market coming in here could be more like in the 500,000-600,000 and less in the 3 to 4. So that's a tough one to answer. The median is our most popular. That's kind of you know, the tail end, really affordable, and then luxury, and that's kind of where the bulk of our activity on that distribution happens. So I would say the median is that popular target for most folks, with some exceptions, folks coming in or maybe folks moving up or down. boomers trading down and upsizers with growing families trading up. From out of state, I guess I would say it's probably the median or slightly above the median. I guess that would be my guess. Let me look into it more and follow up, though.
Representative Nash, any
Thank you.
follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Arbit, you and I have tried to chase that number before, because for members who have not hung out with me before, I get a little nerdy, but my mind works in geographic information systems. That's what my undergrads and masters are in. I want to plot this on a map and also to begin doing some cross-tabbing analysis of where are they locating, what do they look like, what are the things that they're choosing to locate near. But I think that all these slides, I'm going to go home and read them a couple of times because I like that. But it all comes down to that the impact as another variable of new supply, because that was really not in a lot of the slides, was assuming that what's on the market is what we have. But adding the supply changes so many of the dynamics that are in here. So adding housing stock at what price point do you think becomes the significant lever to begin changing some of the things that we've been looking at in these slides?
Mr. Arbit.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Representative Nash, new builds are just around 500,000 now. They're just around 500K. Existing is more like 380, so there's a 120 gap there. I know you see new builds around town in the 450s and in the lower fours, not that much anymore. I'd say for new stuff, it depends what they're targeting. If they're trying to target that move-up buyer to free up the Richfield or the Bloomington or the Fridley or the Roseville home, and then go into a Rosemount or a Blaine or a Lakeville or something like that, 455 seems pretty attractive. But remember, first-time buyers who don't see any inventory around 350, 380, they'd love to see a new home in the 390s or low fours. So housing is a spectrum. It's such a continuum. We need million plus. We need under 300,000. One interesting thought about that, and I think we've actually talked about this in your office, you don't win affordable housing by building nothing over 700,000. If you build nothing over $1 million, where do those folks come? They're going to come into the 400,000 price point and compete in cash, and they're going to win every time. So there needs to be that continuum, that spectrum, and that really is important. Let me do some other math and thinking and try to get a figure, but that's kind of my gut.
Brief follow-up, Representative Nash.
And thank you, Mr. Arbit. You've made the case that I've been making for years, is if we load up on the lower end, we're going to free up both people who need to move up and down. So if we could maybe, and we'll go back to the nerd factory on this, I would love to see a geographic distribution of this, because I believe that the friction of distance does have an element that comes to bear in this, so that if you have land that's affordable and it's geographically further from the urban core, what is that friction of distance coming to bear on people who are willing to, in exchange for a lower housing price, they'll drive X number of miles? And that wasn't here, and I know we've talked about that. I would really love to see, and I'm sure the committee would as well, because at what point do you have to drive to find that level of affordability in that entry-level price? And I think that's one of the secret sauces that we need to figure out.
Mr. Arbit.
Yeah, completely agreed. I mean, without speculating too much, there is this idea of distance decay. That's sort of logarithmic, which is interesting. I know you think about that kind of thing, as do I. I will say that was different in remote versus kind of returning to office environment, where it was easier to be a little bit further out, and that's where you could find the second home classroom and the home office and stuff that families needed at that time. Yeah, more to come.
Thank you. Next on our list will be Representative Scrava.
Thank you. As someone who drives north every Thursday or Friday, I can tell you just past North Branch is where it all starts to go away. But they're willing to drive from North Branch to Metro every day. I got several questions. One of them on page whatever, it's not paged, sorry. Change in new listings by price range. One of the things I find, and I can't find it anywhere here, what are the number of homes? You have these numbers, you have this matrix and everything, but I don't know, is there one home at $1 million? Is there 40? Is there 100? Or how many in the 300? The numbers, I can't find how many homes and it's odd for me to try to visualize it without the number, but
Mr. Arbit.
Mr. Chair, Representative, wonder no more, because I will show you as I speak. So this is our interactive tool that allows us to look at the MLS data just as we're doing kind of live right now. So I will show you, and you know what? I'm going to switch to my bar chart, and I can share. Let me just turn a few of these off. And over the last 12 months, there were almost 1,700 million plus deals in the 16 county metro.
okay.
Yep, so that's kind of the volume. And if you want to compare that to some of the other segments, again, here's 3 to 5, which is our dominant segment, about 21,500 sales in the metro over the last 12 months.
Okay. Okay.
Representative
Thank you.
Scrava.
Thank you, Chair. And then the inventory, you have Minnesota statewide inventory December. I know your data says COVID, or you're equating it to COVID, but a lot of folks that perhaps passed away from COVID were boomers or just above boomers. So a lot of that inventory is going to get resold, or a family member takes it over. Does that come into play at all? Does the boomer graphics come in at all?
Oh,
Mr. Arbit.
I feel like I'd be speculating on that, Mr. Chair, Representative. That would probably be speculation. I think it is fair to say we're in a silver tsunami where 10,000 boomers are retiring every day. And we just saw they're staying in their homes longer and using care and other avenues to stay in their homes longer. I would expect them to be listing more homes than they'd be buying in the coming decade.
Mr. Chair.
Very brief, Representative Scrava.
Yes,
We got a few more
it
people we
leads
gotta get through.
into the final question. On the graph, you have the home sellers and their selling experience, the medium seller tenure in a home. Yeah, you have 10 years. And you kind of just alluded to it, they're staying in there longer. I asked Representative Nash, how long you been in your home? 21 years. I know my parents, how long I'm from Ely. Moving homes is not something they do every 10 years, trust me. So I looked at these numbers, and is this for the nation or is this for the state?
That was
Mr.
national.
Arbit.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative.
Thank you.
That was national, yes.
Thank you,
Good
Mr. Chair.
clarification. I'll make sure that's clarified in the whole slide deck when we update it for you guys, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list will be Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this presentation. Really great information about kind of what we're facing and what we're seeing across the state and particularly the metro area. One question I sort of had, though, are you seeing or are you able to track data about like the quality of the homes that are coming online? Just because, you know, particularly at the lower end of the market, but even in some cities like Seattle, even at the higher end of the market where there are homes going for 800, 900 million plus, they're very much like the really what people consider kind of a starter home, 2-bedroom type situation. They're not the actual like luxury, what you would imagine $1 million house to look like. So I'm just wondering, are we seeing those types of trends happening in Minnesota now too?
Mr. Arbit.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I would worry to speculate about that. We don't really, that's not really in the data. I can poke around to other sources and maybe follow up, but I wouldn't want to speculate on it. Yeah.
Representative Agbaje.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that would be good to know. I mean, I think one of the, you know, in addition to just kind of people being stuck in their homes and things like that, I think one of the fears folks have is that they're not going to be able to actually like buy the home that they want, and then that some of these homes end up becoming rentals that are kind of poorly maintained, et cetera. So just wanting to see if there is any information or if there's places where we can look for that information to better understand the quality or things that we can be doing from a policy perspective to make sure that we are maintaining the homes that we actually still have on the market. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list, then, we're going to go to Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. One I wanted to start off, I have just a few quick ones, hopefully, is the age of 38 from buying their first home. How was it that number is being used? And I don't know if that number is being used to imply that's the first time they can afford the home, or how are we deciding that's the reason that they are buying their home at 38 as opposed to people getting married later, having kids later, all the things that prompt people to buy homes. how do you make sure that that isn't playing into the number?
Mr. Arbit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, this is a national median, and so I think it's influenced by all of those things that you mentioned. Delaying kids, delaying homeownership. I think that's all part of it. And so this is just that median nationally where half the people who buy homes are older and the other half are younger than that 38. So but that 38 is for first timers specifically. And you can see repeat buyers in the darker blue at 61. So I think it reflects a multitude of factors, but that is just first time buyers and it is nationwide.
But I understand that,
Representative
but I
Johnson.
think, sorry, Mr. Chair, I think that's an important number to know because that's when usually people buy their first home is when they're doing that. It's the same with me when I got married later, closer to that 38 time, and that's when we decided to buy our home too, is that I think it's important when we're putting so much emphasis on that number that we don't say it's strictly because people can't afford the homes out there. I think it's a little deceiving in my eyes anyway. So the other thing too is what is do you have a statistics there that says the average time from home to work that people are driving right now?
Mr. Arbit.
Chair, yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, we don't have that. The census, that data is out there, broken down, I think, pretty granular. So that data is out there. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get it pretty easily.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Johnson, yep.
So I think that's important because it'd be nice to know in Minnesota what's that number compared to you watch in California. They're on there for hours, hour and a half. They're driving from home to there to get a home that they can afford. So to be to do it, I think one of the what I've heard in the past as determines how far people are willing to work or drive to work is gas prices. You know, when the gas prices were really low, people were willing to take the time and live out farther. And then last question I have is, what impact are people themselves having on the price of these homes, specifically when they're going into a new home and you see in the billboard that says homes starting at $300,000, but by the time they go and accessorize the things at $450,000. Same thing with people who are staying in their homes or buying a home and putting $100,000 in redoing. So, and these are the things that really, you know, you can't permit out of, you can't do any of that stuff because people are choosing to make the homes more expensive that are buying them, which then starts the whole trend of they can only go up at that point. So,
Mr. Arbit.
Mr. Chair, Representative Johnson, it's a good point. It is a factor that's happening. We do hear, especially today's millennial generation who are in their prime buying homeownership years, hopefully, we see that they are looking for turnkey where they don't want to live through a big remodel. That's what we're hearing from millennials. Gen Z or Alpha or X and Boomers could be different, but we do see that survey data from millennials that they're not looking to take on a major project. So maybe that's why new construction is more appealing, that they won't have to do a ton. Without speculating too much, that's a factor. That's a factor. That's done. And then I suppose it's a good point when you resale that. If you bought it for $350 and you sell it a few years later instead of for $390, that may now be a $475 home. Or maybe you'll stay in it for 10 years. So it's all over the place. I think it varies quite a bit, but that is a factor.
thank you.
That's a factor.
Thank you, Mr. Arbit. And I want to be respectful of your time. Do we have a few more minutes for some questions or?
Yeah, just a few.
Okay.
It's okay.
So the next on the list will be Representative Kozlowski.
Great, thanks, Chair. And to your team for coming in. My mic is off. For providing this really, I guess, jarring and daunting, but also informative presentation. I was certainly struck in looking around the room at eyes popping out of the head and the number of, in some cases 2 and 3 times more production that's needed in our state. I was looking particularly at the residential housing market activity across Minnesota chart, and just, one of the big questions that we get a lot is sort of like, where can we look to for some bright spots and some places to try and emulate and model? I know in our community up in Duluth, we talk a lot in that we don't have a jobs problem, we have a housing problem. I go out and talk to employers who are turning folks are turning away really high paying quality jobs because there's nowhere to live. And I think that is a really good question, Representative Nash, of how far out folks are willing to drive, but also necessitate because of the situation we're in. In my community, I talk to first-gen homeowners and homeowners who say, you know, they bought the house for $150,000 and didn't do anything to the property, and now you look at the market valuation and it's doubled. So I think in terms of whether you do something to the house or you don't, you're not making those improvements, we have a problem. But my question is, looking at Bemidji, that you mentioned was sort of like getting closer there to the supply. I'm curious if there's any analysis or thoughts on why is Bemidji inching ahead while the rest of the state is in the same place in terms of that supply.
Mr. Arbit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, that would be speculation. Without being an expert in that market, I would have to look at the data. I can probably find some trends and some answers, but you'd want to look at in-out migration, you know, new builds. You'd want to look at a lot of different pieces of that. I'd be happy to follow up, but off the top of my head, I don't know what they're doing right or wrong. But I will say communities around the state and the Midwest and the country, I think there is a lot we can learn from other regions. And I'll say blue states and red states. I think there is quite a bit we can learn from peer cities and peer states that we could do better. I do. So I think it's a good point, and happy to look into it and follow up.
All right, next on the list, then we're going to go to Vice Chair Dotseth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. Question I've got is affordability of taxes and insurance. I think we'd agree that we've seen an uptick in insurance and definitely property taxes. Do you have any real good graphs that actually indicate how much of an increase we've seen? A good story I would have is I've actually, our two children purchased homes during COVID, and just having discussion with them, just with the price of taxes and insurance, just to move and make another purchase, it would almost be impossible to do so.
Mr. Arbit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Representative, thank you. It's definitely a factor. You know, the supply piece is one piece, and that's keeping supply tight, which makes prices go up. That's only part of the payment. The other payment part are the second T&I that you referenced. We don't maintain data on the average tax bill or tax rate for MLS sold listings, but we do have some of that data though. We have that tax data in the listing, as I think you know. Mm-hmm. So that's all in the MLS. We don't report on it much yet. I think we could in the future. I think that's one thing I'd like to do more in the future. But without reporting on it, it would be speculation. Sometimes we use the word anecdata. You have data, and then you have anecdotes, and sometimes there's anecdata. And anecdotally, you know, we're definitely hearing, we are hearing that, but I don't want to speculate because I don't have hard data on it. But clearly, taxes and insurance are upwardly mobile and a growing piece of the payment pie, which can't necessarily be addressed with more supply, but more supply can help bring down the P&I part of the payment. If we can't control that T&I, I think there are some levers, but that part is harder. Just like the interest rate, the FOMC piece is harder, if not impossible to control. So thinking about where we have levers. Yeah.
Just a final comment, I think.
Vice Chair Dotseth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think as we move forward, we just have to address this multifaceted and really realize that there's a number of different factors that we're facing, not just housing supply, but cost to maintain and stay in these properties as well.
Yep, Mr. Chair, especially HOAs, I just wanted to add, we're hearing, particularly around HOAs and yeah, shared CICs.
All right, next we'll go to Lead Howard.
Thank you, Chair Ago, and thank you for the presentation. I had a question centered around the slide about how long folks are staying in their homes, this 10-year figure, and you know, really the balance of all this information, just sort of the source of so much of this is our housing shortage, and it's creating so many ripple effects. I'm curious, is there data about the positive ripple effects if we were adequately supplied. For example, if we, to the points that Representative Nash was raising, when somebody builds even or moves into a $1 million home or a high-end home, that is opening up another home at a naturally occurring affordable price point. Any new home in our supply is creating ripple positive benefits. I'm curious if there's data that would just show some of the ripple benefits if we get ourselves on the path to adequate supply.
Mr. Arbit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Lead Howard. It would be the list of benefits would be the inverse of the harms.
Sure.
And so, I'll go back. Where was I? I'm not going to find it. Right. So buyers will have more choices, and they won't feel stuck, and there'll be more liquidity. That's really it. It's liquidity in the market. Having inventory is liquidity, where you don't have people chasing too few things. There's that liquidity. There's more homes that do meet people's needs. You referenced the housing chain or the housing ladder. If I move up, it frees up a rung for someone else to move in. And I think that's so huge, especially at the kind of affordable end. And if I feel stuck in my $400,000 home, I'm not going to free it up, even though I probably could buy the $550,000, the next one, but I feel stuck because of my rate, because of low inventory, because of rates and everything. And so prices are rising more slowly or at a more historically average rate. The market will be less competitive, where people don't have to go over asking price. And so it's just a healthier, more sustainable, better marketplace where people can get their needs met and start to gain equity and create that generational wealth that we know homeownership delivers.
Thank you.
All right, and again, I want to be respectful of your time here. Do you still have a few more questions, or otherwise we can direct them to you too as well?
I think that's all for now. I think we should wrap it up, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing remarks then for us or anything?
Mr. Chair, just thank you so much for the invitation today. We look forward to working with all members of this committee and other stakeholders in the legislature that really have an interest in figuring out some of these solutions around supply that can lead to greater affordability. It's a bipartisan issue. It's a greater Minnesota and Twin Cities metro issue. It's a statewide issue, and we look forward to working with all of you this session on these very challenging issues. So thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, right? I mean, I think this outlines, this is the issue that this committee is going to be trying to tackle, because, home ownership is core to what we believe in as Minnesotans and Americans, that if we can't create stable family homes, we can't create a stable community, we can't create a stable Minnesota. So we're going to be tackling this together, and thank you for this data. I'm sure many members of the committee here are going to be following up with you for even more facts and figures. And I'll keep working on my colleague, Representative Nash, to stop bringing up calculus in our committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
So members, I know with them going, is there any, I know we'll direct questions toward them, but if there are any sort of comments or anything that anyone wants on the record we can talk about today, otherwise we can get some more time back in our schedule, and we'll be back here tomorrow. Yep, Lead Howard.
Just one quick question, or quick comment, just for members, keep this close. So much of this data just underscores everything we need to do this year in terms of addressing our huge housing shortage. And to Representative Johnson's point, I looked it up, in the last, from 2003 to 2023, the average median age of someone getting married has increased 3 years. So from 27 to 30. But we're at that 38 number, which is the highest it's ever been in our nation's history. So something's going on. And that tracks, I think, with the conversations a lot of us had with young people in our community, saying that we desperately want to get into home ownership, but we can't find that affordable home. And so just really grateful, Chair, for inviting the Realtors for this great presentation. And it just underscores the core work we have this year to address our housing shortage.
Thank you, Lead Howard. Yeah, that's exactly right. Keep this data, because I think this does show us a little bit of a lens into some of the things that we are seeing. Representative Scrava?
I got a couple calls this summer from people on the North Shore building homes, and architects are designing the homes. They can't get insurance on the homes. because they don't have the fire protection that they need. And I'm wondering, does that, Representative Dosseth brought, insurance and taxes. Does that play in? I mean, and how much does it? And are we, because as you get older, you start making decisions based on dollars instead of, that feels good, it's the right thing to do. At 38, you're like, how much are the taxes? No, we're not doing it. At 28, you're like, yeah, we can do that. I think there's a lot at play here, and what is our role? And I'm still trying to figure out our role as legislators. How do we influence this? Do we influence this? Or do we sit back and watch it? What is our role here? And it's intriguing to me. I'm happy I'm here, but at the same time, it seems challenging. It's just some thoughts. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Scrub. I think that's something that we all need to work collectively on together, and that's why this is going to be a committee that I think is actually going to find solutions, because there's not just a one-size-fits-all. It's going to be multiple things, and I know in the weeks ahead, we've got some bills coming that are going to be starting that conversation on some things that we can do. So with that, I think tomorrow there is some trainings and stuff, so I think we have to come into committee at 3:15 tomorrow, so we'll be back tomorrow at 3:15, and with that, we are adjourned.